Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for sticking around. My name is Dave Karger. I'm the chief correspondent at Fandango. I'm very happy to introduce to you the stars of Shelter, Anthony Mackie and Jennifer Connelly. Hey guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I love seeing a packed house for an intimate film like this, and you could have heard a pin drop throughout the entire time. Although I was saying to Jen outside the scene where you surprised the two guys by speaking French, there was a huge laugh. I could sense that you were wanting to laugh so hard, weren't you, at that? You know, I usually don't like to ask the cliche question of what did you do to research for a role, but I have a feeling that the answer is going to be very interesting for this film. So I would like to know what the two of you were able to do in order to feel like you were ready to play these characters.
Okay. Well, I started. There's an amazing organization in New York where I live called Coalition for the Homeless. They were very helpful to me. I spent time in their offices going through the script with them, going and visiting shelters, going out on their food runs at night. There's also an organization called Lower East Side Harm Reduction Center that was very useful for me in understanding Hannah's drug addiction and her habit. So people there shared their stories with me in their time. I met people out in the streets, walking around doing outreach programs at night in the parks and in the streets, and worked with doctors and a really wonderful woman who was a recovered addict, who had been an addict for years, whose story was quite similar to Hannah's story. She was particularly generous with her time and with her story, and so I worked for a while with her.
Anthony?
Ironically enough, on the end of my block in Brooklyn, there's a homeless shelter. And, you know, it's funny because I would always walk past there and like the church van would be there giving out food, and then invariably at the end of the day, they'd be styrofoam containers everywhere, and I'd always complain, like, what the fuck, clean this shit up, you know, you got to stop that church from giving out food. And, right? And then, and then I read the script, and I was blown away by it. I was blown away by the level of humanity and dignity that Paul gave these characters. And I put on my baseball cap and my hoodie, and I just went outside and like just sat on the corner and just watched these guys, and it was really interesting. And invariably, sooner or later, I was invited into like one dice game, and then all of a sudden, I figured out who were the drug addicts and who were the drug dealers. I figured out who were the mentally unstable people and who were the people who were just, you know, in a bad situation. And I just started talking to people and listening to their stories. And the most interesting thing was just listening. You know, you sit there and they just, you know, the funny thing with homeless people, they're always talking. You know, they never stop talking. Like, what you think? You know, so I would just sit and I would listen. And I learned so much by just sitting and hearing their hardships and day-to-day obstacles than I would have if I would have went in and, you know, done anything else, especially for Tahir, for that character.
So the film was written and directed by Paul Bettany, who happens to be your husband, Jen. And my understanding is that it was inspired by events in your life and experiences that you two have had in your neighborhood. As he was writing the script, did he tell you about it, or was it the kind of thing where it was, here's the finished product, take a look and see what you think?
No, we spoke about it before he had even started writing it. He told me, oh, I have this story. And at that point, it was more a story about which I think it still is very much about judgment, a love story and a sort of an exploration of judgment and of forgiveness. And he told me about the story in its various stages, and then I saw as he started writing it, he would show me pages. So I was hearing about it along the way.
What would have happened if you had said, it just doesn't feel like it's for me?
Well, after a few other actresses had passed on the part, then he... No, he didn't originally, it didn't start out as something that he was intending for me to be a part of, I think. I think he had, was imagining it with different kinds of characters, and then it changed at some point during the writing.
Okay. Anthony, what is it like to, I don't know what the schedule was as far as when you shot this and compared this to other things that you've done lately, but to kind of go from Ant-Man or Captain America or the Avengers to this, is it culture shock just as far as the amenities on the set?
Oh, wow. Well, anybody knows me knows I'm a craft service whore. Just who I am. I'm getting paid for this and there's free food. Best job in the world. But it is. It's very difficult, but this is and truly always has been a passion project. It's ironic. 3.5 years ago was the first time I actually went to downtown. A friend of mine moved to LA, and I went to downtown LA to see my friend. And we went to this sandwich shop, which was right down the street from Skid Row. And I was like, oh my, what is this? And I was just so blown away by the idea of there being so much prosperity and so much disaster in the same city. So I called a good friend of mine who's a writer, and I called my manager and my agent. I was like, I think I want to do like a homeless piece, like something. I think I'm going to write it, and maybe I'll direct it, and maybe it'll be this, and they'll do that and that. And ironically, a year later, this script came up. And I was so happy because I realized it was much better than anything I would have written. And it kind of exemplified everything I was trying to capture in what I saw in downtown LA. And it's great doing the Marvel movies and being the Falcon and all that stuff and being an Ant-Man because it gives you the opportunity to humble yourself and do something like this. I feel like a lot of times as actors we get lost in the idea of fame and nice clothes and financial security, and we forget the world outside of our film set. And this was one of those projects that truly reminded me of the world outside of Hollywood.
There are so many moments in this film that are just so heartbreaking. The one that slays me the most is the phone call to your father, played by Bruce Altman, who's such a great character actor, and when you're in that payphone. Were you able to have him on the other end of the line, or how did that all work in the moment?
There were actually at that point it wasn't Bruce Altman who was there at that point when we filmed the scene, but the actor who was doing it, because there were some scheduling problems, but the actor who was doing it at that point was very generous and came in for the day and was sitting in a car across the street and was rigged through the payphone so I could hear him as I was doing the scene.
And then later, Bruce had to time every
yes.
line to fit what had already been shot?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the answer I was expecting. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You would never know.
Yeah, he
ever.
did a great job.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a scheduling change problem.
Okay.
So.
From a nuts and bolts point of view, the one moment where we really see Tahir drumming is also very realistic. Was there like sweetened audio, or is that?
That was 100% me.
Nice.
Yeah. If you had some buck, I'm lying. That was not me. I love it though. You were like, oh my God! No. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks of drum lessons with this guy in New Orleans. And, we're just going at it. It's like, booga-da-digga-da-da, booga-da-digga-da-da. So the end, I'm supposed to come up to New York, and he's like, yeah, I think you're ready. And I was like, dude, I'm definitely not doing this in the movie. He's like, no, you'll be good. So I get on set, and I show Paul what I've learned in my month of drumming. And he's like, okay. And he goes, and Paul is never negative. He goes, so we have another drummer, like a real drummer. He's amazing. And we're going to shoot him and shoot you. And just, you guys just get to know each other. I was like, so I didn't even have to take all these damn classes, man. I could have been chilling. But I appreciate you for that. It was very sweet.
Dying to know if Paul came home that day and was like, oh my God, Anthony thought he was good enough, and
no, he did that on set.
Oh, right. What was it like for Paul and your location manager when they found that apartment? Because that apartment is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's not in any way a typical New York apartment or any kind of apartment. I was looking at the shot where you're on the terrace and I see the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building, so I'm thinking it's West Village or Chelsea or something.
Yeah, it was in the West Village.
Okay. Was it the kind of apartment Paul had envisioned when he wrote the script, or did he let the experience of finding that particular apartment guide, a lot of the shooting and all of that?
I don't know. I never asked him that question, to be honest. But I think that I don't think he had quite imagined it that way, but I think he was really excited when he found it and thought that it was. I think that maybe didn't look like what he had envisioned, but it fulfilled the criteria for what he wanted, which was for it to be, for it to feel very special and unique and be very much this very different world for them to fall into in this sort of Goldilocks chapter of the movie. Yeah. It was a very special, very strange and special space.
And the film looks so different in those scenes after all that outdoor stuff with natural light and then to go into that world that feels like it's magical in a way. Were there days where either of you were out in the streets of New York and everybody from the crew was so far away that there were people walking by who didn't realize you were filming a movie, or was everyone that we see on screen a paid extra, for instance?
I would say Astor Place.
In Astor Place, certainly, yeah. When the sequence of the movie where I'm out in Astor Place, yeah, that they filmed. We just were there very early in the morning and just started filming, and they were way across the street, and people were. There were people, I had a woman coming up. I had one woman came up to me, and I had the sign that said, I used to be somebody. And this woman came up to me, and she said, you still are somebody. And I was so moved by it, and she gave me money, and I was moved and felt really ashamed of myself at the same time. It's like, do I say something? No, we're rolling. What do I do?
Could someone eventually call cut and then go chase after it? It's okay. It's okay. Well, but in a general sense, what was that like then to go through that for as however long of a period of time that you did that? Did that change your perception of, along with the research, I would imagine, of what it means to be homeless?
The whole process of doing research for me was really eye-opening. I grew up in New York City, but I think probably like a lot of people, who live there, unfortunately. I think we have, to some extent, we must all turn a blind eye. Otherwise, this disparity couldn't exist. That last year there were 60,000 people sleeping in the shelters each night in the city with the most billionaires anywhere in the world. In the city where an apartment sold for $100 million. 25,000 children sleeping in shelters each night. So for me, it was like first of all, even to learn that statistic was shocking. I didn't know, I didn't think about the families living in shelters, the families that were homeless, you know? And just hearing people's individual stories really change, you know, it's sort of, you start, because it is hard to wrap your head around those large numbers, I think, sometimes. But then learning, you know, hearing people's individual stories really, you start to realize, well, they aren't just numbers. They do have, you know, any of us could find ourselves in those kinds of situations, you know?
Anthony, when you're making a movie where the two closest collaborators, in this case Paul and Jen, have such a strong connection off of the set, is it hard to feel like an equal member of the team? Did you come into the shooting feeling like, oh my God, how am I going to permeate this bond that the two of them have?
Not at all. I would say it's interesting. We rehearsed a few days before shooting, and for me, not to speak for you, but for me, there was this instant like bond. There was this instant understanding between Jennifer and myself. There was this instant respect and this this ability to know that however far I go, she's going to be there with me. And it was really soothing to have that experience, because most of the time, as we all know, you do not have that experience. You know, dude is in his trailer eating bonbons, and you're out there talking to a tennis ball. So literally, so it's good to know the person across from you has your back. And you know, I feel like I didn't know what to expect of Paul, but Paul was really the great enabler. Everything I asked of him, as far as I told him I wanted to go, he gave me permission to be ugly. You know, and I feel like so many people would do this movie and like dress it up with dirty Versace, you know, or you know he would be looking really nice but homeless. And I was coming right off a cap, so I was in really good shape, and I'm like, oh man, you know, I got to lose some weight, you know. But Paul really just gave me the freedom to go as far as I needed to go, and I feel like the job of a director is to give you the tools you need to lose yourself in the character. And I don't know if it was because Paul is an actor or what it is, but he really gave me the freedom to be as ugly as I wanted to be.
Jennifer, I remember meeting you 15 years ago, and Requiem for a Dream was about to come out. And I think this performance of yours reminds me, in some ways, some superficial, some not, of that character. And there's just something that you're able to do in bringing these damaged, addicted characters to life that is so strong and so powerful. What do you think it is about this type of character that you find most interesting?
I think there are a lot of things, there are things on paper that she does that seem, that I don't understand, you know? Like, I can't imagine making the choices that she makes. And for me, sort of going through this process and having to find a way to love her, I find really interesting, trying to find that understanding and that compassion for that person, you know? And I think the film asks that of people watching the film also, with these characters, and the characters do that with one another. You know, Hannah and Tahir fall in love and then realize that they embody everything that they always thought that they hated, and then they have to try to reconcile that. I don't know, I guess I find that interesting because I think, you know, people aren't black and white. People do things that are contradictory, and I think, you know, we tend to judge one another and ourselves so harshly sometimes, and I think, I guess, I appreciate that, the effort to understand one another.
How difficult was it to not let the heaviness of this story weigh on you once the shoot days were over, and you did go back home to your kids, and you went home to your life, and did you find that it weighed on you?
Yes and no. I mean, the other thing that, perhaps it resonates with me, I've had a number of people very close to me in my life who have struggled with addiction and ultimately have succumbed to their addictions and died as a result. So it kind of, it sort of recalls those stories and those relationships and those friendships and that loss. So that's, it's sort of nice paying respect to those relationships and also sort of painful recalling them. And of course, the stuff that even though it's fictional, it's all fictional, of course you're making it with the stuff that you're made of. So, it's like if you're expressing love, somehow it's coming from someplace within me. So it's sort of, it's fictional, but it's made of my own story somehow, if that makes, it's kind of abstract. But I don't consciously hold on to anything. I'm always, I want to go home. I want to be home at the end of the day, and I want to be with my family, and I want to be there for my kids. So, I try to let everything go at the end of the day.
Anthony, how about you?
I'm very fortunate to have the training that I had. And one of the great parts of the training that I had was learning how to release and let go once you're at the end of the day of work. And I think the great thing about being married is, for a man, if you haven't released it by the time you leave work, as soon as you step in the door, you're going to release it's like, oh, man, oh, yeah. Because it's just like funk, funk, funk. It's just nonstop, and it's just not like, oh, I need a nap, But I guess that's the reality of being a dad, It's like everybody wants their time. So when you come home, you have to come home correct, because you can't be selfish and say, well, this is my time. You can't, as an adult, I can't do that anymore. My time is not only my time anymore, it's for my kids, it's for my wife. And, wives are very good at letting you know that your time is their time.
Here's a related question from Linda Wolf in the audience, who wants to know from you, Jennifer. When you're playing a character who's under deeply distressing and depressing circumstances, how do you regain your optimism afterward? So I guess my question just now was about kind of each day. I think Linda's question is more once it's all over.
I don't know. I kind of feel like sometimes looking at being aware of context, putting things it helps to put things in perspective. If anything, it makes me more grateful for the things that I have. Sometimes, it's like sometimes you see a sad film and you think, God, that was really sad. Oh my God, isn't it so wonderful that the sky is so blue? And isn't it so wonderful that my kids are healthy and happy? And isn't it so wonderful that we have this? I feel like sometimes it just makes me more aware of how great everything is, frankly, and how lucky I am.
Another question, this is for both of you, from Michael Lamenda, who's in the audience. He says, your performances are always so inspired. What do you do to stay inspired as artists?
You're on a roll.
Oh,
that's you. To be honest, my biggest inspiration is my city. Every time I go home, I feel like New Orleans is the great duality of the universe. And you can sit in, like there was one time I was sitting in a restaurant and literally on my left was one of the heirs to the Chase banking family. And on my right was the guy who had just got $15 out of his guitar case outside from playing his guitar, came in and ordered a drink and a sandwich. And I feel like living in that reality is very comforting and humbling, and I feel like there's no other city you can do that in, and the reason I moved back to New Orleans, one, is because I like to fish and play golf, but it's that reality of just being a normal guy is okay, You know, and if that, I feel like one of the things I enjoy about working is bringing normality to my characters, you know? So that's kind of like what grounds me and keeps me happy and lets me detach from the chaos that is our business.
What inspires me? People. Other people, people's stories, getting to know. I love working. I love meeting. Love the whole thing. Happiness, just joy. I think just making the most of every opportunity. I'm always so excited when I have the opportunity to work on a film and meet new people and new talents and explore new characters and learn more about the people that I'm with and spending time with, the people on the set and the characters that I'm playing.
And let me end by asking, you know, for so many of us in this world, in this country, our default setting when faced with a person who is homeless is to ignore. Just, you know, don't make eye contact, don't look at them at the intersection or on the sidewalk. What would you hope a film like this can change in people's hearts and minds, and what has it changed in yours?
I hope they can be part of a conversation about, you know, how this disparity can exist and what we can do, because it is a solvable problem. And, you know, if people are inspired to do something about it, I know that there are wonderful organizations here. I'm not as knowledgeable about them here, but New York Coalition for the Homeless is an amazing organization. If people want to become involved, go on their website. There are ways to get involved financially, with your time. It's a place to start. Anthony?
Anthony?
I say, you know, start at home. You know, I think it's interesting when we do movies, at the end of the day, they trash so much food. And I'm like, God, just give that food to people. You know, there's so many little, you don't have to go out and change the world. You know, but if everybody changes one person, if everybody helps one person, you can change the world. You know, and I think thank you. I think, you know, that's one of the things I learned from doing this movie, because it was, you know, it's not large enough to say this movie is a passion project for me, because it's something that truly changed me as an individual, because I realized in myself that I was that person. I was the person that every time I saw a homeless person, I would judge them, I would ridicule them, I would look at them with disgust and turn the other cheek and walk away. And once I did this movie, you know, just seeing it and living in it for those few weeks, it just, you know, judgment is an easy thing to do. And with the advent of the internet, we've become socially retarded. We have. I mean, in order to date now, you swipe left or right, you know? So I think it's time for us as, you know, individuals to move past our limitations.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank both of you enough for being here. Anthony Mackie, Jennifer Connelly, and thank you all for staying around.
Thank you.
Have a great night.